Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and in this video, we'll be going over the affidavit that Susan Miller filed in her divorce from Reginald Wayne Miller. The reason I'm looking at the Millers' divorce is that it gives us a look into John Paul's childhood, and I think it helps to explain where he's landed in life. So let's just hop right in. Susan started with number 1. I am the plaintiff in the above action in which I seek an order of separate support and maintenance, custody, child support, alimony, equitable distribution, attorney's fees and costs, and other related matrimonial relief. My husband, Reginald Wayne Miller, and I met when I was in high school in 1971 when I visited his church, Evergreen United Methodist, and heard him speak. I later began attending a community prayer meeting where I was asked to speak. Wayne was also there, and I began noticing how handsome he was, and he inquired about me. I graduated from high school and went to Winthrop College. During my second year there, Wayne called my mother, asked for my phone number, and asked me out for a date. Well, phew. I would have worried if Susan said that she fell for Reggie because of his effervescent personality. Number 2. Wayne and I started dating, and during my third year at Winthrop, he asked me to marry him. I wanted to finish college, but decided I loved him more. He showed his temper at my parents' house, pointed his finger in their face, and slammed the door so hard we thought it would break off the hinges. My parents didn't want me to marry him, but Wayne told me I had to choose between them or him. I was hurt, but Wayne wanted us to marry, so against my parents' wishes, I quit college and married Wayne on April 14, 1974. My parents were disappointed that I quit school and more disappointed that I married Wayne. They were so upset about the marriage that they would not attend my wedding ceremony. Well, that was a quick courtship and marriage. Susan was 21 when they got married, and Reggie was 26 or 27. And I'm sure that Susan realizes this now, but giant red flag the size of Texas, Suze. If you have a healthy, loving relationship with your family, and some yahoo tells you to choose between them or him because your family was concerned about his temper, run as fast as your sturdy little legs will take you away from that person. Number 3. I had a job as a clerk typist at a Dixie Cup plant and worked every day from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Wayne would sleep late and would go to his little church, which he started himself with only a small group of people. He was discharged from the United Methodist Church in Evergreen, South Carolina. I never knew why they let him go. There were rumors, but I was too much in love to ever believe there was any truth to them. I love how Susan throws in little church. And I'll bet those rumors weren't that Wayne was the best bread maker in the church and the elders and deacons were just jealous. After 6 months of working, Wayne wanted me to quit so I could spend more time with him, stay at home, and be more help to him as a pastor's wife in building his ministry. To please Wayne and help our ministry, I quit my job. I started having church members over for dinner so we could get to know them and help them feel a part of our church. We often had church meetings, prayer groups, and Bible studies in our home. Every week we would have some family over for dinner. The various church functions consumed our lives. We had little time for each other. As a new wife, I wanted time alone with my husband, but he did not seem to want or even care if we were intimate. He would even take one of his friends, either a young Bible school student or a young man, with us when we would finally have time together. Wayne insisted that I ride in the back of the car behind him, while he and his friend rode in the front seat. I began feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. I was so in love with Wayne, but I never felt he loved me as I did him. Wayne even started going out at night with his friend, whoever it was at the time, leaving me home alone. I wondered why I quit working just to be his servant. Well, this is like a super messed up version of Driving Miss Daisy. Susan had to sit in the back while Reggie and his air quote friend sat up front. I don't know what these Miller men do to women that keeps them loyal, but Reg seems to have had a hold on Susan from the beginning. It obviously wasn't some magic that was happening in the bedroom either. Number 5. I continued doing whatever Wayne asked of me. I started doing the church newsletter in our home, And once a week, several members of our church came to our home to prepare the church mailing. I even started keeping the nursery at the church to try and be a good pastor's wife and make Wayne proud he married me. Wayne started a Bible college in Florence, South Carolina, and needed me to teach typing and shorthand. Doing all I possibly knew to please Wayne and make him proud of me, I began taking piano lessons to become Wayne's image of what a pastor's wife should be. Wayne insisted that I wear dresses to church and wanted me to look the part of a pastor's wife. I played the piano for church service once. I did my best to assist Wayne in his ministry. So I don't think Susan ever wanted to be a pastor's wife. I think she had ambitions of her own and gave them up for Reggie. Number 6. Wayne always wanted to be well known as a pastor and speaker, so he began traveling to other places, speaking to sharing groups or small churches. He preferred taking a male friend or Bible school student than me. I began feeling very lonely and unloved. Sometimes I would cry and ask if he still loved me. He would say yes, but he never spent much time with me and never seemed to want or need sex. I knew something was just not right. Wayne told me I was too fat and I was not a turn-on. He told me hurtful things like, if I was woman enough, I could get him aroused enough for him to have sex with me. Ugh, I was humiliated. I tried everything, but to no avail. We began having more problems sexually. Our sexual problems were always my fault. Oh my. Here's a photo of Susan in 1978. She was not anywhere close to being fat. I think Reg was just frustrated because he was having to pretend to be straight when it sounds like he was and is not straight in any use of the word. I think he pushed the blame onto Susan because he couldn't bring himself to admit that he didn't get turned on by her because she had the wrong plumbing. Number 7. Before our marriage, I was involved in a national Christian organization that met weekly. After my marriage, I attended a weekly prayer group for women, which I believed would help build our ministry. Wayne took various groups of people to visit the Holy Land. Once he allowed me to accompany him, but I realized again that it was not a time for us, but for him to teach and show people the Holy Land. I'm not sure that Susie Q should have expected that a trip to the Holy Land would be a romantic jaunt for the two of them. Number 8. We continued to work very hard at the ministry. It was literally a 24-hour, everyday process. Even in the middle of the night, he was often interrupted to go visit church members who were in distress or sick. Our entire life seemed to be always working for the parishioners. Having a member over once a week wasn't enough for Wayne. It was all the time. Monday mornings were shared with other people in preparing and mailing out the church newsletter. Tuesdays were taken up with prayer groups and teaching at the Bible college. And Thursdays were taken up with teaching an evening church service. Fridays seemed to be our only opportunity to be alone, but Wayne never seemed to want to be alone with me. He preferred being with everyone else. He said they needed him. I told him that I was his wife and had needs too, but he never wanted to touch me. We would go months without being together intimately. He was too busy to care about me as he was always doing things with his male friends. He would continue to tell me I was too fat or I turned him off, but he seemed to get aroused with his male friends, whomever he was with at the time. Wayne began taking trips without me, but with male friends who often were usually a young Bible school student. Well, this affidavit could have been a lot shorter if Susan would have just spit out that Reginald prefers blondes as long as they're men. And I think had he been able to admit it back then, a lot of people would have had much happier lives. Number 9. We had worked so hard building the church that at one time we had the largest charismatic church in eastern South Carolina. We even began a television ministry called Good Morning Jesus that was televised 5 mornings each week. We also did radio talk shows. Ever since the Gloryland video that I made, I was hoping I'd have another chance to say, Good morning, Jesus. Number 10. On May 20th, 1979, we had our first child, John Paul. Wayne continued inviting himself to prayer groups. He wanted to become well known so badly. He loved being in the public eye and thrived on people admiring him. Our second child, Patrick, was born in December of 1983. Wayne would continually leave the children and me to travel all over the United States to start television programs for Good Morning Jesus. He took the children and me to New England, but he went along with his associate most of the time. Our sons hardly knew who their father was, as he was too busy for them and me. When he was home, he was too tired to even play with our children. I always took care of all of our children's needs since Wayne was always busy either studying, planning, sleeping, or gone. I became involved with a group of breastfeeding women called La Leche League. I had monthly meetings, sometimes in my home. My whole life was being a father and mother to my children. They were my complete joy and happiness. They loved and needed me as much as I did them. My children went with me everywhere unless I accompanied Wayne to a function, at which time the children would stay with my mother. When one of the children would wake during the night, Wayne would ask me to go to another bedroom with the child to keep from disturbing him. I eventually began sleeping separately because he never had a desire for sex, and I grew tired of his putting me down. It was difficult with 2 babies under 5, and we would sometimes get into arguments. Once or twice, our arguments resulted in Wayne hitting me. My children were my whole life. My husband didn't need or want me except to wait on him and be a servant. He would lay on the couch and want me to wait on him. Well, technically, Reg has gotten to be well known, but being arrested by the FBI for student visa fraud, among other charges, probably wasn't the way he wanted it. It seems that Susan was just a showpiece for Reg, or in technical terms, his beard. Number 11. Wayne would not allow our children to miss church at all, not even if they were sick. He did not allow our children to observe Halloween, Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny. Although I disagreed with this, I respected his wishes because he was head of our household, and I was afraid of him. A few times, Wayne called me in front of the church people and said embarrassing and humiliating things to me. Since I had not finished college and little work experience, I had no real good job skills. Therefore, I endured Wayne's behavior. Who else do we know who spoke poorly about his wife from the pulpit? Number 12. Wayne provided me with a charge card for Belk and JCPenney to use for the purchase of clothes, although most of my clothes were bought at the Hartsville Manufacturing Company. My mother bought 90% of our children's clothes. Wayne had major credit cards, for example, Discover, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, and when he had used the available credit lines on one of the cards, he would obtain one in my name. Wayne made me sign some papers once, which I later learned was a second mortgage on our home. Wayne has always felt he was smarter than I. Once he threatened to take away my car keys if I didn't do as he said. I eventually did whatever he asked because I didn't want my children to suffer any more than necessary. Number 13. When our oldest son John Paul was about 5 or 6, we were at Disney World. Wayne lost his temper and beat John Paul with a leather belt so badly there were bloody stripes covering both of John Paul's legs. I was shocked. It was horrible. Wayne made me go out of the room and would not let me in. On another occasion at home, Wayne beat John Paul horribly. This time I intervened, but marks were already on John Paul. Wayne said the Bible said to spare the rod, spoil the child. No matter what John Paul did, the punishment was always more severe than the crime. The next day, my mother saw John Paul and told us that she would call social services if she ever saw his buttocks, back, and legs blue, cut, and bruised again. I don't think there's any questions about why JP and his father don't have a close relationship now. And I wonder what John Paul's life would have been like had his mother gone ahead and called social services that day. Number 14. My role as a wife was to help meet my husband's needs, do whatever he told me to do, even if it meant letting the children wait for whatever they wanted or taking the children to church, even if they were sick. I was to submit to him because he was head of our household. That is what Wayne said the Bible says. Many times my children needed school clothes or church clothes, and Wayne would say he didn't have the money. However, when it came time for him to take trips to speak or to go on vacation to Bermuda, he would find a way to buy for himself, even if it meant charging them. He would then tell people I was responsible for all the charges. He has a charge card in the name of Cathedral Baptist Church, which he used for personal things such as trips to Charleston, cruises to Bermuda, gas, dinners with friends, and flowers for one of his male friend employees' yard. Well, it sounds like all those overdraft fees and bills that Reggie claimed were Susan's in his affidavit were actually his. And I don't know about you, but I am positively astounded and taken aback at the thought that Reginald might lie about something. And I wonder how often he traveled to Bermuda back in the day, if those trips were similar to his more recent trips to Pakistan. Number 15. When we lived in Florence, South Carolina, we had a beautiful 2-story home with a Florida room, a living room, a formal dining room, a playroom, 4 bedrooms, a library den, and a lovely manicured yard surrounded by a brick fence. One night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up and Wayne was not anywhere. I learned the next morning that Wayne was in one of the bedrooms in our home with Alan, a handsome young minister who had attended our Bible college 2 years earlier. I was so shocked. Shortly thereafter, I had 2 wives of Bible school students in their 30s tell me that my husband had tried to feel their genitals and wrestle with them, meaning the husbands, or get on top of them while they were on speaking engagements. I think I was in total shock and my world began slowly crumbling. I was devastated and wondered just what kind of person had I married. So it's interesting that Susan mentioned that Alan was handsome. I guess if she had to admit that her husband was with another man, she didn't want anyone to think that he was with some ugly schmuck. Number 16. A few months later, I kept hearing more rumors of sexual innuendos. When WPDE Channel 15 out of Florence heard about Wayne's inappropriate activities, it aired a segment about Wayne for 5 nights in November or December of 1988 or 89. Several men were on the program with their faces blurred and their voices disguised to protect their identity. They told how Wayne tried making sexual advances toward them. The Florence Morning Newspaper even had an article about Wayne and alleged homosexuality. I became fearful for my children and for me. I wondered if I could possibly get AIDS from Wayne. Number 17. The families in our neighborhood began talking about us, and the things they said embarrassed my children so much. My sons lost their friends and became lonely as no mothers would even let their children come to my house again. We tried everything to build a ministry again, but we eventually had to move out of Florence. No one would forget the television report aired by WPDE. We were forced to sell our beautiful home and leave our friends and my parents. I could have left Wayne then, but I hated to leave him when he was down and needed help. I agreed to stay and help him, so we packed up and moved to Myrtle Beach. I helped him start a brand new ministry called Cathedral. We covered his mistakes up, hoping no one would ever find out. Wayne told me that if I would stay, he would go for counseling. We both did for several years, and our marriage improved somewhat. We had a 3rd child, Lacey, in December of 1990. I think this is when Susan began to become very bitter about her life and how things were turning out for her. It seems she was proud of her house and was not happy about having to leave it. But it also sounds like she almost blamed other people more than Reggie for the consequences of his actions. And yes, no one would forget the television report aired by WPDE, but if Reggie had kept his cucumber in the crisper drawer, they wouldn't have had anything to report. I don't think the hoping no one would ever find out worked out for her. And now that her son has drawn attention to Micah's death, there are even more people who found out. Number 18. Our children were and are the most wonderful part of our marriage. They are my entire life. Wayne allowed me to stay at home with them and not work outside the home for almost 27 years. All I have ever done well is be a mother. It means everything to me. He never wanted me to work and leave them. When our daughter, Lacey, began school, I decided to go back to college and take one subject at a time. This was wonderful for my self-esteem. Wayne paid for 2 or 3 semesters, then decided he would not pay for any more classes. I continued my education with my sister's assistance. I kept taking 1 or 2 classes each semester. I maintained a 4.0 GPA and was one of 16 students out of 150 to be accepted into the dental hygiene program. I wonder if Reg paid for her classes until he saw that it was good for her self-esteem. It sounds like maybe he'd spent too many years tearing her down, and he wouldn't want to have his wife thinking she was worth more than what he offered. Number 19. When our home in Florence sold, we got approximately $43,000 in net proceeds. Instead of Wayne getting a regular job to support our family, Wayne held church services in a store, hoping the crowd would develop overnight to support us. We lived off the proceeds from the sale of our home and used some of the proceeds to pay off our credit card debt. When we moved to Myrtle Beach, Lacey was about 2 years old, and I did not want to put her in daycare. Patrick attended Lakewood Elementary School, and John Paul attended Socastee High School. It seemed much easier for Wayne to work than for me to leave our 3 children. He was very capable of working. He had made a living teaching piano at one time. I encouraged Wayne to study and take the real estate exam, hoping he could sell real estate at least part-time to help us out financially. He did well on the test and sold real estate for a short time. His heart was set on his ministry, so he quit selling real estate. Reggie probably figured out that being a pastor was easier and more lucrative for him than selling real estate. He has said in sermons that being a pastor is one of the hardest jobs in the world, and because he likes making up statistics on the spot, he's made the claim that pastors are in the top 3 professions of people who take their own lives. That's not even close to being accurate. They aren't even on the chart. So if Reg is claiming that it's the hardest job in the world for him, we can maybe assume that it's the easiest. Number 20. Eventually, Wayne started a Bible college in Myrtle Beach. Our church property in Florence sold, and after the mortgage was paid, we had enough money to purchase the chapel at the former Myrtle Beach Air Force Base. Wayne and 2 15-year associates taught at the Bible college. Wayne received an honorary doctorate degree from Indiana Bible University, and ever since that time has requested that he be called Dr. Miller. Well, Susan just threw so much shade the temperature dropped 10 degrees. And according to a sermon that John Paul gave, his grandparents were millionaires, and that's actually how Wayne purchased the chapel. I don't know which is more accurate. Number 21. Wayne would find things to do to keep him away from our home. He would travel and speak, teach at the Bible college, and start a Christian academy, daycare, and kindergarten. I didn't mind this. I was very proud of him, but I grew tired of always taking a back seat to everything and everyone. He would continue to preach fire and brimstone at church and fuss at me about everything. Either I wasn't doing enough for the church or I wasn't measuring up to his expectations. All our children and I wanted was his love, but he never had time for me or the children. I had no life outside of the church. Our whole life was consumed with the church. He began giving out so many doctorate degrees that when I did start back at Horry Georgetown Technical College, one of my sociology professors commented on a church near our campus who gives out PhD degrees like water. I was so embarrassed. It seems that knowledge that Reggie had a diploma mill was well known over 20 years ago. How many doctorate degrees has he cranked out over the years? Number 22. When our son John Paul was a teenager, many times Wayne would get into physical fights with John Paul, and we would have to call the police to our home. Wayne would get angry and lose his temper. Wayne has a very volatile temper. Last year, Wayne upset all of us when he got mad at Patrick, who was 15 at the time. Wayne would slap Patrick with a belt and leave scars and bruises on him. Lacey, our daughter, who was 8 at the time, would scream and cry terribly. We would beg Wayne to stop, but he would not. He just kept hitting and slapping Patrick, and once even had his hands around Patrick's neck, choking him. I know he felt bad the next day, but he was horrible at the time. Patrick is a sweet child with a learning disability. Wayne even allowed a teacher in our academy to put Patrick beside her desk and face the other children while she ridiculed and called him slow. I begged Wayne to stop this, but he would not until I called a psychologist at Socastee High School, Ken. So Susan has said that Reggie had a temper before they got married, and he beat J.P. bloody when he was 5 years old. How many other beatings did the boys get from Reggie? Number 23. I have always taken care of my children. Since their birth, I have fed them, diapered them, read to them, prayed with them, taken them to their doctor's appointments and dentist appointments. I even drove them to school instead of letting them ride the bus because I wanted to make sure they felt loved and to know that I was there for them any time. Eventually, Patrick turned 17 and got his driver's license. Then he would drive Lacey to school, but I still would go and pick Lacey up when school was dismissed. Many times I would take lunch to my children after they started attending our Christian academy because the kitchen facilities were not clean. Number 24. For many years of our marriage, I was so lonely. When my youngest child started school full-time, I asked Wayne if I could go back to school. I wanted to better myself, and he offered to give me a job teaching in the academy or kindergarten. But I personally felt like I wanted to be knowledgeable enough in that area and not just pretend I had a degree. I discovered I also had a learning disability. I just learned slower but studied harder. I wanted to learn new job skills in order to find a decent job. Wayne and his mother thought I could work at Bojangles. She didn't want to pretend she had a degree, so there's that Susan shade again. And I guess she was insulted that Reggie and his mother dare suggest she work at a fast food chicken place. Number 25. It still seemed my husband had time for everyone but me, especially his men friends. I felt so starved for affection and love. He would find places to go with his friends, while I was left alone with my children. He made no effort to spend time with me or to love me. I realized my husband had a problem and was not the normal husband. I don't actually believe that it took Susan until the mid-90s to realize that Reggie wasn't what she calls a normal husband. I'm pretty sure she knew from not too far past the starting line of their relationship. Number 26. Donna, a woman who Wayne had hired, her boyfriend Rick and I would occasionally eat lunch together. Donna and Rick had broken up several weeks earlier when Rick phoned me and asked if I would give him a ride somewhere. I said no, it didn't look right because I was married. Rick called several times asking for a ride. Each time I would call Donna and ask her to please call him. One time he pestered me so much I broke down and gave him a ride somewhere and then took him back home. He wanted me to come in to see something and I thought nothing of it. When we got inside, he kissed me and tried to be intimate. This was certainly nothing I had planned and it just happened. My relationship with Rick lasted a very short time. My husband started being suspicious and without my knowledge, connected a tape recorder to our phone and placed the recorder under his bed. I never even suspected a thing. I had no idea he was recording all of my phone conversations until an Ori telephone employee came to service my phone and found the recorder after the relationship with Rick had ended. Attached is a copy of the letter received from Ori Telephone regarding the recorder. So I'm not convinced that Susanna is being completely honest here. She didn't think it was proper to give a man a ride somewhere because she was married, but didn't think twice about going inside his house alone with him? I'm not buying it. Number 27. I started having back and shoulder pain and went to the doctor. I was told that I could benefit from having a breast reduction. After breastfeeding 3 children for healthy reasons, my body had just taken its toll. My insurance company thought I also needed the surgery. It was not a cosmetic surgery, but a necessary one. I had the surgery in February of 2001. Number 28. My relationship with Wayne further deteriorated, and Wayne moved out of our home on February 25, 2001, and left me and the children. He moved into a new condominium near our church. He cashed in his life insurance policy, which had a cash value of approximately $15,000. He stopped paying the electric and water bills for our home where the children and I live. For the first few weeks after he left, he did buy groceries for the children and me, but he has stopped that. The electric company has threatened to disconnect my electric service due to the past due status of the account. I was required to pay $179, the minimum payment to keep the service from being disconnected. I had to sell my dining room table and chairs to get funds with which to buy food for the children and me. Wayne has had our telephone service at the marital home disconnected, and I was required to pay $75 to have the service reconnected. Had he told me in advance, I could have made arrangements for service to continue in my name without a fee. Wayne has also stopped the garbage pickup service and has stopped paying the water bill. He has failed to timely pay the mortgage payment on our home, and the lender has threatened to foreclose our home. Number 29. Wayne tells me he has no money. However, Wayne has recently purchased an expensive dog for our daughter, entertains as he chooses, takes friends out to dinner, purchased new furniture including a flat-screen television, installed a security system in his condominium, and purchased new clothes for himself. He never has money for our food, water, or mortgage. I wonder if Reggie's church has had one of those handy-dandy benevolence funds. Number 30. I have tried to be fair with him concerning the children. Our daughter stays with Wayne at least 2 nights each week. Our son Patrick does not want to go to his father's home, and since Patrick is almost 18, I do not believe he should be required to visit his father. After Wayne moved from the marital residence, he returned while I was not at home and took Patrick's bedroom furniture without my knowledge. Patrick has been sleeping on the couch. The upstairs air conditioner unit at our marital residence is broken. I have asked Wayne's help in getting the unit repaired, but he has refused to have it repaired. Number 31. Wayne continually threatens to take Patrick's truck away from him if he doesn't spend the weekends with him, which is cruel and mean. The truck is titled in the name of the church, so Wayne controls that as he does the people there. He always tries to be in control. Well, I don't want to give anything away, but Susan ended up with a son who seems to act a lot like his father. Number 32. On June 24th of 2001, Patrick did not go to Wayne's church. He was recuperating from strep throat and also had to work at 12 noon. Wayne called after he realized Patrick missed church. He phoned Patrick, yelled, and showed his temper. He threatened again to take Patrick's truck. Patrick explained that his boss needed him to work just this once on a Sunday, so Patrick said he would. Wayne showed himself and phoned Patrick's boss and embarrassed Patrick. I want to take our children to a normal, established church with me when they are with me on the weekends, but Wayne threatens me or the children if they don't go to his church. I am tired of living with his threats. Number 33. Wayne goes off on strange tangents sometimes. He invited a speaker recently to the church right before I stopped going. This man said gold dust was falling on the people in the congregation and there was glitter found on the platform. I think my children deserve the opportunity to visit an established, well-known traditional church with a pastor who's educated in a seminary. Susan is just super proficient at throwing shade. But I really need to know if this man tried to convince people that glitter was actually gold dust, and if so, did the congregation believe him? Was this some bedazzled attempt at teaching prosperity gospel? Number 34. Wayne had offered me $700 a month and use of a car for 3 years if I would agree to him having primary custody of our children. I could and will not agree to that. I have always been the primary caretaker of our children, and I need to have the main say-so in their lives. Wayne is smart and helps them study, but he gets off on weird things like gold dust falling, and I'm afraid he might continue to do strange things. Because Wayne goes off on weird things, he attracts strange people. A few months ago, one of the strange people whose family members had visited Wayne's church went out and bought a gun and was looking for Wayne to kill him. Wayne even warned me to lock my doors at home. I was terrified, and I fear for my children's safety in his custody. Wayne has quite a few enemies. One of the writers of the Sun News, David Wren, wrote an article about Wayne and referred to the misconduct charges that were brought up against him in Florence. The children and I again felt embarrassed and humiliated over this. So there's got to be more to this story than just that Reggie attracts strange people. What did Reg do to cause a gunslinger to come blazing for him? And why does Susan mention journalist David Wren right after she mentions that Reg has a few enemies? David Wren is an outstanding journalist and has more integrity in his worn socks than Reggie has in his entire being. Number 35. Everyone who works for Wayne is intimidated by him. Wayne is so manipulative. He's unstable, and I don't want him to ever lose his temper again with Patrick, and God forbid he ever hit my daughter. She and my son want to live with me, and I believe their best interest would be served by custody being granted to me. Number 36. I had no choice but to quit school and get a job when Wayne moved out and left us. I make $7.25 an hour and drive over 40 miles a day to and from my job. Lacey goes to the church's summer camp, and Wayne keeps her until I get off work. I don't know why Susan had to work somewhere 20 miles away. Was it because she thought maybe people wouldn't know her there? Number 37. I had to borrow the funds from my sister to pay my attorney retainer fee of $2,500. I cannot support my children and myself on my minimal salary. I am willing to move out of the marital residence to a less expensive place, but I shall need financial assistance from my husband by way of child and spousal support. Number 38. I seek an order of this court granting me custody of my children, requiring my husband to pay child support pursuant to the South Carolina Department of Social Services Child Support Guidelines, use and possession of the vehicle in my possession, spousal support, and attorney fees and cost. And we are finally at the end of Susan's affidavit. So the divorce was granted, and they were given joint custody of the children, but Susan had them more than Reggie did, and he had to pay child support. Susan was able to claim the children on her taxes, and Reggie had to provide health insurance for them. He also had to provide Susan with a vehicle and was responsible for the taxes, insurance, maintenance, and upkeep on it until Lacey graduated from high school or until Susan remarried. Reggie was also required to hire Susan as an independent contractor and pay her $150 a week for typing and computer work, with a maximum number of 10 hours worked. And Reg had to pay that whether or not Susan even did the work. I don't know what the purpose of that was, but I'll bet Reggie didn't like it. And so the Millers went their separate ways, Reg to live a full life of doing things like exposing himself to an undercover police officer in a bathhouse. Speaking of, I was rereading the newspaper article about his arrest, and I had missed a detail in the report before. And that was that Reggie approached the undercover police officer while only wearing a t-shirt. Yep, old Reg was over there Winnie the Poohing it and trying to get the officer to follow him into the other stall. But back to Reggie's life. He remarried, and then his second wife divorced him when he and the FBI got to be such good buddies, and he got to go on his little incarceration. As far as I know, Susan has remained unmarried and doesn't seem to leave her house much. She did attempt to join my Facebook group the other day, though, which I thought was, well, interesting. Was it really her, or was it possibly someone who has access to her account? Thank you so much for watching. Check out the link in the description to find out how to become a member. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share as it will help my channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.